All right, Earth is a stage, Earth is a game, Earth is a show, Earth is a matrix. But what does it mean for something to be a matrix? I know what you're thinking. Probably this. No. That's not what we mean by Earth is a matrix. Even though that is a really, really great theatric reference, I don't want you all to think in dystopian terms. I know Earth, the world can be pretty dark and gloomy, especially right now, but it doesn't have to always be that way. There are some beautiful moments and beautiful scenes on Earth that are worth living for, but no, I don't mean that I'm Neo or you're the one. Don't even focus on being the one. Just focus on being you and remembering what you came here to do. But let's keep going. I want to go ahead and give you guys more academic definitions for what a matrix is. So let's just take a look. A matrix from the Cambridge Dictionary: the set of conditions that provides a system in which something grows or develops. Okay? From Merriam: something within or from which something else originates, develops, or takes form. And from dictionary.com, we have something that constitutes the place or point from which something else originates, takes forms, or develops. Now for the mathematical definition of matrix. A group of numbers or other symbols arranged in a rectangle that can be used to solve particular mathematical problems. So if you're familiar with sacred geometry or like Metatron's cube, focusing on this definition of matrix is going to be really important, especially as we dive into the simulacra and simulation. I'm going to actually break this up into two parts because I realized diving into simulacra and simulation gets really technical, and for some of you it'll be boring, and I don't want to lose you. So we will circle back around to simulacra and simulation and why that definition of matrix is really important. But let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So when we say, or when I say we are living in a simulation, and when you hear someone living in a simulation, and we will get into what the definition of simulation is a bit later.
A huge experiment began that aimed to prove convincingly how stability was maintained in ecosystems. An ecologist called George Van Dyne set out to create a computer model of the grasslands that stretched across Colorado. All the animals, insects, plants, and the systems that linked them were going to be recreated inside a computer. Van Dyne wanted to finally show how feedback really worked in nature.
What George Van Dyne really wanted to do was take the universe that you're seeing out here in front of you, this grassland landscape, and be able to represent it in the computer, to have a virtual grassland.
Van Dyne hired dozens of researchers to begin collecting data on everything that lived in the grasslands and what was underneath in the soil. They built a machine that travelled across hundreds of square miles, hoovering up insects and small mammals. George Van Dyne then used all the data to construct a vast, intricate model that simulated how all the different elements of the system, the plants and animals, interacted. Every species had its own submodel that was then linked through feedback loops to other species and their submodels.
All right, so we are living in a simulated environment. This world is either simulating a world that once existed and no longer does, or a world that still exists and certain stimuli or certain variables are being rearranged or introduced to produce a certain result here before it's done there. All right, so let's keep going. Something else is Earth has been repurposed many times, meaning it's been reused for something that it was not intended to be used for in its original creation. There are three types of systems. Well, there are more than three, but we're going to touch on three. You have open systems or an open matrix. You have closed systems or a closed matrix, and you can have an isolated system or an isolated matrix. So let's go ahead and hop into what it means to have an open system. An open system can exchange both energy and matter with its surroundings. The stovetop example would be an open system because heat and water vapor can be lost to the air. So that is a very simple example of what it means to have an open system. And in open systems, you can transform and you can transmute. So let's go back to the right use of will, because they actually described Earth as being an open system. In the beginning, many spirits could change forms or transform. Although some had more mastery of this than others, all could do it. It was not unusual at the time for a spirit to do acrobats on the way to the pool with arms and legs, and then upon diving into the water, transform legs into a fishtail, if swimming was more fun in that form. If later there was a desire to fly, wings would appear. Okay? So, in its original inception, its original creation, source players, when we came here, we could come and go freely because it was an open system. So when we wanted to log off, we could log off, we could log back in, no biggie. We could transform or transmute into different forms. Some will say, is that shape-shifting? Yes, it's shape-shifting. And I know now in popular culture, shape-shifting has this negative notation. It's usually associated with reptiles or the lizard people. But listen, again, that's that spooky shit that's been created now. But once upon a time, that's what we came to do. We came here to experience different forms, different bodies. Came and went, and we chose what we wanted to be. Now, let's get into what it means to have a closed system or a closed matrix, which is where we are now. A closed system, on the other hand, can only exchange energy with its surroundings, not matter. If we put a very tightly fitting lid on the pot from the previous example, it would approximate a closed system. Again, so in closed systems, we can transfer energy from one another, but we can't transform or transmute into an entirely different form altogether. So when we think about, or when you've heard the reincarnation cycle, that's what it's touching on, a closed system. Because spirits can't freely go and come as they please because the density has been lowered so much. When you die, you don't leave. You come back, you reincarnate into another body. Now, for some of you, you are aware enough on that next cosmic dimension that when you come back, you can choose your body. I chose my body. But many of you do not get to choose your bodies, which is why you feel in conflict with yourself. I'll touch on that a bit later, but not just now. Again, I did choose my body, and I chose this body to bring about a particular experience. I chose a Black woman's body to help recover my memories quicker. This is the perfect body to do it in, but that's going to come way down the line when I explain why I chose this body. Now, from my understanding, Earth is also an isolated system or an isolated matrix, meaning it has been cut off from the rest of the planets. It has prevented certain spirits from coming and going altogether. So think about Earth being under quarantine, because Earth does have a virus. Earth does have a virus. And apparently this virus is so nasty that it had to be isolated or quarantined. So when you think about antivirus software and how that works, think about there are some others, some good others on the other side that are working to resolve the virus that Earth has. But again, you have to kind of isolate the issue. You have to isolate the virus to attack it first. So you can't have too many things coming and going, because you might have people inadvertently, not people, but you might have beings inadvertently coming in, picking up a virus, and if you let people or beings out, that virus may spread. So it's quarantine. So Earth is under quarantine.